Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. I am excited to have our returning guest. I think I was the first person to put him on a podcast. I did officiate his wedding. Corey DeAngelis. He is probably the biggest school choice advocate we have in America. His most recent book is called The Parent Revolution, which was endorsed by two important people, myself and President Trump. He's also senior fellow at the American Culture Project and a visiting fellow at AIER. Corey, what is the American Culture Project, by the way?
We fight to reclaim American culture from the radical left that's infiltrated our schools for decades. They figured out that they didn't even have to have their own kids anymore. They could control the minds of other people's children by taking the school system over, brainwashing kids for 13 years of their lives for 7 hours a day, and basically pushing our country towards a socialist trend. American Culture Project fights to fund students, not systems, to reclaim families from teachers' unions' control.
Yeah, this is something I yell at conservatives all the time, and I'm positive you agree, which is, open up our schools, open up our schools. Like, if you hand over, why are you handing over your kids to be raised by people who despise you? And don't be surprised, 13 years later when someone unrecognizable comes home. I mean, this is just, like, think about it this way. Like, this is a more extreme example. Actually, it's not that extreme. If I, kidnapped your daughter, right, and raised her in a cult, and then I bring her back to you, at the age of 17, do you really think she's going to have the same perspective she would have if you had raised her yourself or you had raised her in a school that was more aligned with your values? It makes no sense.
Yeah, and this is why the left is really freaking out right now. You have Randy Weingarten going on MSDNC
Wait, hold on. Let's
every
pause this.
day, it
Let's pause
seems.
this because this is the best. This is the one of the best things happened last month. Because I have a
Yep.
Twitter thread of daily wins from Trump. Randy Weingarten, I think it's important before we bring out this character onto the stage to explain to Americans just how awful she is. She's really one of the most evil people in America, in my opinion. Maybe you're not allowed to say that. She's the head of the teachers union, the UFT, United Federation of Teachers. Uh, uh, I asked you recently because I'm writing a book. I'm like, what percent of that money goes toward Democrats? And you looked it up for me. It was 99.9%. I think it was like 3 million for Democrats and 3,000 for Republicans. Now, it's perfectly fine if you are, ostensibly a partisan organization, but you would think if your priority is education, you play both sides, right? Like I'm worried about the kids. I'm worried about the teachers. Let me kind of, this other people and other issues, play both sides and it works for them. But no, it's just a hardcore partisan Democratic operation, and not just Democrat in this like, broad sense of welfare state, but really hard left ideologues. Can you please talk a bit about her before you continue?
Yeah, it's a money laundering
Yeah.
operation. That wasn't just this past election cycle in 2024 was 99.97%. For the past 3 decades, we have data on this from Open Secret since 1990 showing about 99% every single election cycle going from your tax dollars to the government schools to the teachers unions, and that gets funneled back to the Democrat Party. Wash, rinse, repeat. It's a money laundering operation. It ought to be illegal, and it's more about politics than education. And we've seen this with what they're injecting into the classroom. They're not focused on the basics. They're not focused on math, reading, and writing. They're focused on gender ideology, radical Marxism in the form of DEI and critical race theory. And Randy Weingarten's the head of the American Federation of Teachers, and they have a whole bunch of local groups as well, but they lobbied the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, during the COVID era to make it more difficult to reopen schools in person. This isn't a secret. They knew they could leverage the closures for more money because what have they done for a long time? They've always said, well, if we're failing based on math and reading, it's because we need more money. And then it turned to, well, our doors are closed because we just need more money. It's the same thing over and over again. It's the definition of insanity.
Wait, can I
Outcomes never get any better.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
it's also kind of imagine any other field where no one's arguing that the outcomes are negative and possibly getting worse or equally bad, and you say, you know what that means? It means I need a raise.
Yeah, and we spend about $20,000 per kid per year. That's 52% higher than average private school tuition in this country. So it is an insane amount of waste of money. Think about it. If you have 30 kids, that's $600,000 in the classroom. Only 60% of the fund, or $60,000 is average teacher salary each year. where's the rest of the 90% of the funding going? It's going towards administrative bloat, goes towards the massive buildings that they create. It doesn't go towards education, and the outcomes prove it.
And you know, it's also funny because some of their arguments are so nonsensical. It's like, oh, first of all, there's this thing about the kids can't learn because the textbooks are literally falling apart. It's like we have an internet. Like number
Yeah.
one. Number two is like, oh, the kids, can't learn because the buildings are collapsing. It's like Abe Lincoln learned in a log cabin. Like the idea that I did not grow up with money. I don't know if you did or not. Doesn't really matter. But I learned to read because I wanted to learn to read, not because of the architecture of my family's apartment or so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I think the jig is up though, because they closed the schools and because Randy led this crusade against parents and their children. Families got to see what was happening in the classroom through Zoom school
Right.
or remote learning, which I've called it remotely learning because there wasn't a lot of learning going on. But at least we got to see that they weren't just focused on the basics. And families who thought their kids were otherwise okay because they got A ratings from the state, they saw, well, hold on a second. What did you just say on the in the Zoom virtual classroom? You're telling kids that they're oppressors or they're the oppressed, or you're trying to tell my boy that he could be a girl, and so on and so forth. That's what mobilized parents to launch this revolution. And now we've had 15 states pass universal school choice, kind of Milton Friedman's vision for school
How
choice
many
for
states?
everybody. 15 now, and we have two more on deck this year: Texas, our home state, and New Hampshire as well. It's going to happen in both. So we'll have 17 states after this year.
Wait. Let's break. Hold on. So first of all, also there's something I want you to address. It is my understanding, and I don't think this is the Mandela effect where I'm having false memories, that Randy Weingarten later repeatedly lied that they fought to get the schools open. Now, her getting the schools closed wasn't like backroom deals. This was very public at the time. COVID was obviously the big news event while it was happening, and there was a lot of controversy. Okay, like who's going to open when, and the teachers very publicly and very consistently were kicking and screaming, saying, look, I don't want to catch it. You can understand in a very broad sense that, like, if you took at face value, okay, if I'm interacting with 500 strangers on a daily basis, that's going to up my risk of catching disease. Fine, I can wrap my head around it. But the point of the matter is they did fight this tooth and nail. And
And
then
nobody
later,
else did. No
right.
other industry. The private schools were open. The preschools were open. The colleges were, for the most part, more so open than the K through 12. Grocery stores were open. The bars were open. But for kids in K through 12 in the public schools where they had the lowest risk, they were
Right.
closed because they had the unions controlling them.
Right, and but then Randy publicly said, "We fought very hard to open the school." She said this in writing, and what happened is she would get read to filth on Twitter. She would get ratio
Yeah.
community notes. She would
Yep.
delete the tweet and repost it. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yes, every day for like a week, she would repost the same thing, saying, and she did this because she went before Congress on a special committee about the coronavirus pandemic in the House, and she testified and lied to the American public before Congress in a congressional committee, and said, "No, we fought to open the school since April of 2020," and that's what kept getting community noted. Because and she'd delete it, and then she'd say, "Oh well, the Republicans." They're lying about this, but she was gaslighting everybody. If you were fighting so hard to open the schools, why were they closed? And why did you lobby to keep them closed? And why did your local affiliate say it was racist to reopen schools? I mean, we have so many miles of receipts. It was just laughable for her to try to rewrite history on this issue.
But is it? I mean, break it down for me. Is it laughable, or is it the kind of thing where she lives in a world where, for a lot of her audience, she's never going to be held accountable for what she says?
Yeah, that's part of it. She's been so drunk on power for so long that I don't think she's going to reverse course anytime soon. I figured we're starting to win on school choice so much, she might scratch her head and say, maybe I should back off a little bit instead of being so partisan. And maybe I should, focus on my members instead of focusing on, these radical ideologies in the classroom and fighting against school choice. Maybe we should recalibrate. I don't think they've learned much of anything. And I think it's because she is in a position of power. She makes over $500,000 a year, and her members reelected her. So I think she's making the members look bad with she's on X every day just fighting against conservatives. There's a lot of conservative teachers,
Oh yeah,
and
nonpartisan teachers who are just like,
and
hey,
the
I want the
money's
kids to
not
make their own decisions.
and the money's not going to the teachers either. You look at where the money goes since 2000. We've had we have data on this nationwide. Since 2000, the student enrollment's been pretty flat. It's only increased by about 5%. The number of teachers in the system has increased about twice that rate, by about 10%. But the number of administrators has increased by 95%. And we do have data on spending over time. Since 1970, nationwide spending in public schools has increased by about 170% in real terms. But teacher salaries have been flat. They've only increased by about 3%. So the best teachers leave. They say, to hell with this.
Right.
Randy has an incentive to hire more people because that means more dues paying members, more funding to funnel back to the Democrat Party and to spend on other political pet projects. And it also means a larger voting bloc so that she can have more influence that way.
Can you be a? Are you, does her union include members from private schools, or is it strictly public?
I'm pretty sure it's just government schools.
Oh wow, okay. So no
Yep.
wonder she's fighting through the nail.
Yep.
So before we took on this detour, you were talking about she was on MSNBC, and it was a beautiful clip, and she was basically foaming at the mouth. And as I also love the idea that she's foaming at the mouth, like we're supposed to care. You know what I mean? Like this is business. Like if your business isn't going well, I'm not going to bring out my handkerchief and start crying for you.
Well, if anything, she's helping amplify our cause by
Yeah.
making herself look like an idiot. And I mean, yeah, her streaking on TV is basically providing free advertising for the school choice movement and the parental rights movement, because she just looks like an idiot. And she was foaming at the mouth about the possibility of abolishing the Department of Education. And she later admitted on a podcast that she's actually only really angry about this. She knows that the money might be block granted back to the states. And so it's not like she's going to lose any funding anyway. She's going to lose control. One, she won't be able to lobby that department as easily. You'll have the power dispersed and not as centralized. But then two, she admitted on a podcast that she thinks some states, like my home state and your home state of Texas, might use the funding, and instead of just giving it back to the school districts, they might give it back to the parents. They might use it for school choice. And so I think that's the real concern that they have.
Folks, there's lots of skincare products out there promising to turn back time, but how do you know they actually work? Well, with OneSkin, there's no guesswork. Their products are backed by lab and clinical data, and they're powered by the proprietary OS1 peptide. OS1 is the first peptide scientifically proven to target zombie cells. Those are the dysfunctional senescent cells that speed up aging at the cellular level. You can only find OS1 in OneSkin's moisturizers, sunscreens, and now in their latest product, OS1 Hair. This daily scalp serum tackles those same zombie cells, but instead of targeting lines and wrinkles, it combats the aging cells in your hair follicles to reactivate your natural growing cycle. I am super excited to try this. I'm not going to lie. Like, very excited. Thank you, OneSkin, for sending me some. It's perfect for anyone dealing with hair loss, thinning, or shedding, or if you just want thicker, denser hair. That neck beard can be a lot thicker, guys. You know what I'm talking about. In a 3-month clinical study, they found real improvements in hair density, fullness, and overall scalp health. Try OS1 Hair or any of OneSkin's products with 15% off your first purchase. All you got to do is use code MALICE at oneskin.co. Founded and led by an all-woman team of skin longevity scientists, OneSkin is redefining the aging process with their proprietary OS1 peptide. You get 15% off with code MALICE at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code MALICE. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please tell them Michael Malice sent you. Invest in the health and longevity of your skin and scalp with OneSkin. Your future self will thank you. You're welcome. Let's get back to the show. So let's talk a bit about this because, a lot of Trump voters in my audience, and I think I put this out on Twitter, which is obviously not a scientific sample, but I was like, I think everyone would have been happy if he closed the border, kind of deregulate a little bit, and stop DI. Like, it's a wrap. Like, that's a successful presidency. When he was talking about abolishing the Department of Education, I thought, and I'm sure you thought as well to some extent, that okay, this is like campaign rhetoric, or maybe this is like Steve Forbes the flat tax. This is something we can start getting the road to, on the road, to some extent. And then when he's like, yeah, I'm doing it, I think you, I'm sure, and I were both like, wait, what? Like he's really doing, because it's like unprecedented. It's literally unprecedented in our lifetime, other than when Bush kind of collapsed a few agencies into what became Department of Homeland Security, that any kind of, especially a major department like education, is going to be, slightly mitigated, let alone close to abolished. Can you walk us through what the state of affairs is? Is it actually abolished,
Yeah.
and what does this mean?
He signed an executive order to take the first steps at abolishing the Department of Education. It requires an act of Congress to fully get rid of it because it was created by an act of Congress. Republicans do have both chambers, but in the Senate we have something called the filibuster.
Yeah.
And in order to end a filibuster, you need a 3/5 majority. We would need 7 Democrats to come along in the Senate, but that doesn't mean there aren't things that we cannot. There are things that we can still do to give a death by 1,000 cuts. So they've already started that approach by firing half of the people at the department already. I can't believe they even had 4,400 people working there to begin with, pushing paper, not really doing anything. And things haven't really changed since they fired those people. And so that was kind of the first step. The other step was there's a bill in Congress right now, and it would be great if they could pass this. It's by Senator Mike Rounds, a Republican out of South Dakota. It's called Returning Education to Our States Act, and it would block grant the money using the Treasury Department back to the states. Many libertarians on the podcast might say, well, just don't take the money from us to begin with. Why does it have to go to the feds and then back? This is just the most politically feasible option in front
Yeah,
of
right.
us right now. If there was a separate bill to do what libertarians would like, I'd support that as well. It's just there's no legs or any support for that at the moment. But any useful agencies that people might think that, the left is fear mongering about students with special needs.
Right.
Trump has already, the day after he signed the executive order, and I was at the White House with Miranda, my wife, at the executive order. It was a fun time. The next day, he announced that student loans would move under the Small Business Administration, and special needs programs are going to be moving under the Department of Health and Human Services. And within Mike Rounds' bill, the senator from South Dakota, he lays out where everything else would go. So like civil rights protections under the Department of Justice. But to get to the point of your question is, there's something else that the Senate can do without a supermajority. They do something called the budget reconciliation process, which only requires 51 votes, and there are 53 Republicans in the Senate. So they could zero out funding for certain things, and we've seen the department already do this through within their own purview without Congress, eliminating funding for DEI, withholding funding from Columbia University and others
Yeah.
that they're looking at as well. And so when I saw those things, I was like, yeah, I mean, why is any university with an endowment of billions and billions of dollars, why are they getting taxpayer funding to
Right.
begin with? You might disagree with their protests about, Israel, and I think that's a good reason to get rid of their funding. But we may disagree with their Marxist professors too, and we should get rid of. I shouldn't have to pay for that with taxpayer money either. So hopefully, those things are just a start of of things to come.
Yeah, I was talking, and we don't need to get into that. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was kind of like on the fence about deporting these foreign students, over like Israel and Gaza. And I'm like, I'm of the mind, deport them all. You're here on our country, and it's your time to mind your P's and Q's. And I think people underestimate how dangerous a lot of these foreign students become, because they become radicalized and they become educated, and they go back to their home countries and do real carnage. The best example of this was Pol Pot, who was educated in France, I believe, radicalized, and he went back to Cambodia and killed, was it a quarter of the population within like 3 or 4 years. So these aren't like people coming here learning how to, be programmers and then go back to like India or Norway, and then they're great tech support. They're political activists who are kind of given intellectual steroids in the West, and they cut their teeth and get their practice in a free speech environment such as we largely have still, and they go back and use that power against their own people. So I think any excuse you can to get rid of such types is a very healthy thing, in my opinion.
And I don't think that this starts at the university level either. It's
Oh,
obviously
for sure.
amplified by their professors, but at the K to 12 level with all the critical race theory, and you're teaching kids that they're going to be failures just based on, how they look, and or they're going to be oppressors based on their immutable characteristics as well. I mean, there's actually a nationwide survey that just came out, and before this survey came out, I didn't really know how prevalent the CRT stuff actually was. I knew that if it's happening, it's bad, and we're seeing it all over social media, and people are reporting on these things, but we didn't have systematic data. But we now have an Education Next survey. It's a nonpartisan organization. If anything, I would say they're more left than right. And they asked high school students in the US, a nationally representative survey, how often certain tenets of CRT were taught in the schools.
Yeah.
And one statistic that stuck out to me was that 36% of the respondents said that their teachers often or almost daily said, quote, America is a fundamentally racist nation. And so when you're teaching kids these things throughout their entire lives, and their parents don't know about it and don't
Right.
know to counter these ideas in a more useful way, and they continue this through college as well, of course you're going to see them, um, they're either going to be more violent individuals, less tolerant of others' views. They're going to hate America. They're going to hate free markets and free enterprise. And so I think the school system is the root of a lot of the problems that we're seeing today.
So how much authority does Trump really have to dismantle the Department of Education?
Yeah, I mean, for better or for worse, and I'd say it's for worse when that our executive branch is limited when we want to use it to reduce government
Right.
influence. I think the founders, if they could have tweaked anything, would be to, if we're going to reduce government involvement, it should be an easier lift. If we're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
increase government involvement, it should be a heavier lift, maybe a higher percentage of votes to do those things. The thing is, who gets to decide what is a increase or decrease of government? I'm sure politicians would abuse that left and right if that were the rule. But the reality is, in America, the executive branch is limited in what it can do through executive order. And so, like I said, he took the first step at saying we should do something to abolish the Department of Education. And, that's kind of the first step. I'm glad that he did it. I'm glad he's using the bully pulpit to get people talking about it. And who knows, maybe some Democrats come along after they see that he is moving what he can right now under his power to different agencies. Student loans, if those move under the Small Business Administration, that's a large portion of what the Department of Education is already doing. That raises the question of, well, if it's not doing anything now, when we get to that point, it's not as heavy of a lift to just totally get rid of it. And so hopefully Linda McMahon can fire herself and get in there and body slam that department once and for all. It's unconstitutional. The word education is not in the Constitution, and it was created in 1979 as a political payoff by Jimmy Carter to the teachers union, the NEA, the National Education Association, which happens to be the largest labor union in the country. And it's spent nearly $3 trillion since that time.
Um, so I think people often have a misguided understanding of what the Department of Education does. It's my understanding that it actually isn't really involved in curriculum that much. It's more like it's just taking money and then shifting it around, almost like some kind of roundabout. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And what it can do is leverage that money to incentivize states to do different things. So we saw this with the
Oh,
Dear Colleague letters with Obama. We saw Biden trying to prevent states from getting money if they didn't have the right, gender ideology policies. And so, and even if these letters don't actually, if they aren't like heavily enforced, it does have a chilling effect at the state level as well. And so states might be incentivized to listen to whichever department's in charge. And I think Trump did a really good job at campaigning on this issue. Instead of having a negative talking about, I'm abolishing the department, he really flipped the narrative to say, he reframed by saying, we're going to return education to the states. And that's, it's more transparent. The money is block granted back to the states
yeah.
if it can actually get it done. And they get to have more local control about how that money's spent. And some people might say, Corey, you're in Texas. That might sound like a great thing. But what about California and New York? My response is, well, it can't get any worse. And the department's not really reining in the terror that's happening in the classrooms in California and New York already. So, there's a huge upside in the red states, and I don't think the downside in blue states is all that large because they're already having tons of problems as it is. I mean, Colorado just yesterday, they passed separately, they passed taxpayer funded abortions for everybody, whether you live in Colorado or not, so people can come in and do that. And
Oh,
whether
wait,
you
wait. I
agree or
just hold on. It was taxpayer funded?
taxpayer funded abortion. So, we can disagree or whatever about whether abortions should be okay at different, at different time frames. But this is taxpayer funded abortions in Colorado. The Senate already passed it. The House passed it yesterday, and it's going to Governor Jared Polis, a Democrat, right now. And they also separately passed a bill that attacks parental rights by
Wait, before
saying
you
that
get
if you
into that, I'm
miss,
sorry.
yep,
Before you get into that, because this is a big one.
yep,
I didn't realize how crazy it is.
Senate
So
Bill 183.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of shocking to see because there's a lot of gaslighting. I think this happened even during the debate that Donald Trump had with Officer Harris when he's talking about states have abortion up to the moment of birth, and she's like, "You're crazy. That's not the case anywhere."
They
I just
do.
literally, I just literally put.
Colorado.
Hold on. I just literally put into Google Colorado abortion law, and the AI overview, which is not always accurate, that's what I'm going to double check, says in Colorado, and this part is highlighted. People can look themselves. Just put in Colorado abortion law on Google. Abortion is legal throughout the pregnancy without gestational restrictions. And then key points. Bullet point 1: abortion is legal in Colorado at all stages of pregnancy. And then bullet point 4 says Colorado is one of 7 states without any gestational restrictions on abortion. Now, I broadly consider myself pro-choice. Oh, that term, is kind of difficult to maintain nowadays. But the idea that that someone's about to give birth, that you're a dad, that they can go to the doctor and just say, take care,
Until the umbilical cord is cut
yeah,
outside.
I
Yeah.
can't wrap my head. I can't wrap my head around the argument, like at all, Like,
Yeah.
I mean, are you gonna tell me that if someone sees a newborn and they take a pillow, that's not murder? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, it is murder, and taxpayers get to fund it now if Jared Polis
Which he will.
sign. Yeah, and he's horrible, and he tries to claim he's a libertarian, but he runs as a Democrat, so he's not libertarian. And so that was just an aside, really. I mean, that is a crazy bill. It's going to the governor's desk. And on the same, and they did this on a Sunday. It was a special Sunday session. The Democrats are insane people, and you know what they were doing. They were driving a knife into the Republicans and people of faith. And they right after that they closed debate. They wouldn't even allow debate on third reading, final passage on the next 2 bills, which were one, mandating insurance companies cover things like puberty blockers and sex change surgeries, even for minors. And a Republican introduced an amendment to say, okay, let's just do this for adults. These gender affirming care things, and let's keep the kids out of this. The Democrats blocked the amendment to exclude children, and so they passed that. That's now going to the Colorado Senate. And then finally, they passed a bill 1312. It's called HB 1312 in Colorado. All Democrats in favor, all Republicans against, to require courts to use whether a parent misgendered a child in custody disputes. So you can lose your kid if you misgender your child. In other words, if you don't participate in the fantasy land idea that might be going in the head of your child, if your 3-year-old thinks, if you have a 3-year-old girl that thinks she's a boy, if you don't affirm that new gender, that can be used against you and you can have your kid taken away.
Yeah,
And
I think people. I'm reading about this now, and I saw this on Twitter, and as I'm just going to quote. There's someone named Representative Jarvis Caldwell. He's a
he's
Republican from
good.
Colorado Springs, and he says the idea that misgendering your own child is considered coercive control, which is another word for child
Child abuse.
abuse,
Yeah.
because you want to get your child help instead of affirming their delusions. This is the most disgusting bill I've seen so far. And it also further said that schools could not adopt a gender-based dress code under the bill. And if a school has an adopted policy related to chosen names, that policy would have to be inclusive of all reasons, that a
Yep.
student might adopt a chosen name that differs from the student's legal name. Um, the oh my God.
Yeah,
And
the
it says,
custody dispute is just one part of the bill.
yeah, and the thing is, again, coercive control, which is legally the same thing
Child
as child
abuse.
abuse. It says dead naming and misgendering are regarded as child abuse when it comes to child custody. So you have a lefty mom, and for being a trans mom is like is like the exact same thing as dollars and tiaras for the leftist. It's like
Yeah,
I'm a
Munchausen by proxy.
Yes, I'm a child. I'm a trans mom. I won. I have my little boy. He touched a doll. Clearly, he wants to be a girl, or he likes Oprah, so clearly he's a female. Or I mean, the tenuousness is insane. The idea that gender dysphoria is kind of this universal thing that's about to happen to everyone. And if the dad's like, hell no, she can take the kid, and the court will be very heavily prejudiced against the dad, and very
Yeah.
heavily, and he regarded as if he was basically touching this kid inappropriately. It's child abuse.
Exactly. And it's not that the court's being told that they can't consider it, it's that they need to take that mom's side. They have to be on the side of, if you live in reality, the courts are going to use that against you. It's an insane bill, and it also requires the state to classify misgendering and dead naming as discriminatory acts. So if a
Right.
business, you know, does this, they can get in trouble. If they misgender someone, then businesses can get in trouble as well. So it's a far-reaching bill. All the Democrats voted in favor of it. Now it's going to the Senate, where I expect it'll pass the Democrat-controlled Senate in Colorado as well. So we got off on a little bit of a tangent, but that you used to call me the white pill dispenser. There is a lot of good things going on in different states, in red states. They're unleashing parental rights. We're moving towards this national divorce, it seems. But in Illinois, they got rid of school choice in 2023, and now they're coming after homeschoolers. They have
Wow.
a new bill that just passed, despite 42,000 people registering in opposition. All the Democrats voted for it to increase regulations on homeschoolers, and it's a sad day in blue states, especially Illinois and Colorado.
Guys, did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life? So there's a valuable tool that gives you insights to create a healthy metabolism for your body, and it's called Lumen. It is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. Lumen is a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you got to do, breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning. You'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for the day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time, and Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits: easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, so on and so forth. The warmer months are here. Spring back into your health and fitness. Go to lumen.me/malice. Get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/malice for 15% off your purchase. And thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Folks, you might not know this, but I have over 300 plant species in my house. I had to bring in one of my trees over the winter, one of them from Madagascar. And I'm a big fan of fastgrowingtrees.com. They're the biggest online nursery in the US. They've got thousands of different plants, over 2 million happy customers. They have all the plants your yard needs: fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, so much more. Whatever plants you're interested in, Fast Growing Trees has you covered, so you can find the perfect fit for your climate and space. And Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to get your dream yard. Order online, get your plants delivered directly to your door in just a few days without ever leaving home. I like the sound of that. Their Alive and Thrive guarantee ensures your plants arrive happy and healthy. Plus, you can get support from trained plant experts on call to help you plan your landscape, choose the right plants, and learn how to care for them. Having plants in your house and outside is really a fun thing. You can watch them grow. It's just exciting. And a lot of them are really easy to take care of, and the website will help you out navigating that situation. The other thing I really like about them is the selection. Yeah, you go to those box stores, but I'm telling you, they've got cool stuff in there at the same price so that you'll be able to stand out from your neighbors and they'll be all jealous, as mine are, and I can't really blame them. This spring, they have the best deals for your yard, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get 15% off their first purchase when using the code WELCOME at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using code WELCOME at checkout, or just go to fastgrowingtrees.com/welcome. It's that easy. Now's the perfect time to plant. Spring's here. Use code WELCOME to save today. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. Let's get back to the show. I was of the opinion, which I still am, that there are enough smart people behind the scenes of the Democratic Party who would see that the trans issue is a big loser for them. It polls horribly. Everyone watching this, I'm sure, if you haven't seen already, when President Trump got into the face of Maine's Governor Mills, and basically, told her, you're. I'll see you in court. This is going to be an easy one. Even in Maine, which is a left of center state, it's the number for like having trans athletes in women's sports is just very low approval. I think for a lot of people, when you start coming for the kids, this is when it crosses the line from, all right, you have your opinion, I have mine. Let's talk about this. Like, okay, gay marriage. Okay, marriage has always been between a man and woman. Oh, well, yeah, you should have a right to marry your partner. You could have this argument. When things like kids start getting taken away, and mandatory surgeries if the kid just decides, it's I think for a lot of swing voters, which there are much more of than people think, this really makes them run in the other direction because they're parents and they imagine it being their own kid, and it's
Yeah.
terrifying.
And this is an 80-20 issue in the Senate, U.S. Senate. They tried to pass the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. You have to play with your biological sex, and it failed to require the 3/5 majority because all the Democrats unanimously voted against it. So you'd think, in the midterms, they got to be punished on because of something like this. We'll see if they lose some votes because they defied the will of the voters. But Trump did win the parent vote by 9 points in November. You'd
Oh
think the
wow.
Democrats would think about these things. He also won on education, which a lot of people don't remember. Atlas Intel, the most accurate pollster from 2020, and they also correctly predicted Trump winning all 7 of the swing states. They did 2 separate polls on who do you support on education, and both of them found Trump beating Kamala Harris on education, which might not seem like a big deal to you and me or to some of the listeners, but for politicos who pay attention to these things, Democrats have had a decades-long double-digit advantage on
Oh
education.
wow.
So for Trump to even the poll showed he was winning by like 3 points on education, but doesn't matter. It was a huge shift to the right on the issue of education because I think it's changed from being an argument about who's going to throw more money at the problem to who's going to respect the right to direct the education of their child. And obviously, Trump beat Kamala on that issue.
I think this is one of those issues that demonstrates how politics works, and how insidious politics is, and how you can't assume anyone is acting in good faith. Because 5 minutes ago, we were all taught, and I think pretty much everyone, or people might huff and puff, but like push comes to shove, they'd agree that like, look, like little gay kids shouldn't be like shoved in lockers and driven to suicide and made to feel like horrible in school. They should feel safe in their own person, and we should encourage kids not to treat others badly and stop bullying. Okay, fine. We can wrap our heads around that. And then 5 minutes later, it's if you refer to your own son or daughter by the name that you've given them or by the pronoun which corresponds to their sex, that this kid is going to be taken from you or forced in surgery against your wishes. Like very quickly, people will be like, bring back the bullying. Because if like these are the choices I have, you're forcing me to make this ridiculous choice. And I think and at the same time, the gaslighting that this isn't happening, like this is just all smoke and mirrors, this blah 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 blah. It's disheartening, but it's also making me glad, this very specific thing, that a lot more parents are becoming much more involved and are alarmed heavily about what's going on in the schools instead of looking the other way as they did maybe when you and I were a lot younger.
Yeah, and this is an even bigger issue than the critical race theory issue ever
Yes.
was. It's the transgender insanity that has infected the school system. And there's also like simple bills that are passing in red states and getting blocked in blue states, like they're called Parental Bill of Rights, and it's basically, it doesn't really change all that much in the law on a day-to-day basis, but it does kind of put into statute that parents are the primary decision makers for
Yeah.
their kids. West Virginia just passed one out of their Senate, and now most recently their House. It's going to the governor. I think he's going to sign it. I don't know if he has already, but um, it passed on a party line vote. All 9 Democrats, there's not many of them in West Virginia's House, but all 9 of them, they voted against the parents' fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their children. That's a quote from the text of the bill. And in Washington State, this happened like a month or two ago. They had a parental bill of rights, and a Republican on the committee tried to introduce an amendment to say that if there's sexual abuse happening in the school, that he said that the amendment was to immediately notify the parent of that
Yeah.
happening if there's a case of sexual assault with the teacher and a student. The Democrats killed that amendment. I mean, it's gotten so insane in some of these deep blue states, and the Democrats will try to. I don't even remember if they made an argument as to why they killed the amendment, but you would think at some point Republicans can use these votes as campaign material. And this goes beyond just saying, well, Democrats voted against school choice. This is the Democrats voting against immediately notifying parents if there's sexual abuse in schools because they're so tied to the teachers' unions. And who knows how long it's going to take, but at some point it gets so bad in a state, it has to swing the other way.
There was
And, some of these purplish states may become red states because of it, but Washington state's like so far gone at this point.
I think people don't appreciate how much this abuse of kids in schools is swept under the rugs, because very often, first of all, any predator, where you're talking about a lion or a hawk, or a predator on kids, the predators know to go where the prey are. And
Yeah.
the predator also knows to camouflage themselves, because you don't want the prey to know that I'm there. By far, the most common incidence of abuse is within the family, for this reason, and this is very unfortunate. But what's insane, when people should look this up, in the schools, when these teachers get caught, they're often just like suspended with pay. They're put in the rubber room. They're called, at least they're called it back in Brooklyn. They're not
Yeah, New York
fired.
City, yeah.
Yeah, they're just like put like on administrative leave, because the union's job is to make sure no one gets fired. This happened to a friend of mine. I don't want to even say what state. His daughter, she was under 10. I don't remember how old she was. This wasn't a teacher, like another student of the same age was putting his hands between her legs. Let's just put it like that. And he found out about this later, complained to the school, and they're like, oh, the kid doesn't know what he's doing. Like, let's not make a big deal of this. And I'm just like, it is a big deal. I don't know if this kid should be in jail, but at the very least, he needs to be sat down and really has some sense knocked into him. I would say literally, because there are some lines that are just like, this isn't, throwing like your sandwich at someone's head in the school lunchroom or stealing their lunch money. My God.
Yeah, there was actually a Department of Education report of all things back in, this is like a decades old report. They need to redo it. If they're going to have the department, they should do, some
Yeah,
useful things, or some other researchers could do it. We don't need the Department of Education to do it, but they have a 2004 report, I believe was the year, where they estimated that about 1 in 10 children going through the school system will be sexually abused or experience educator sexual misconduct by the time they finish 12th grade. And so, that's an insane amount of abuse. It's probably higher now because of all the technology that teachers have to reach the kids, and vice versa. So um, it's a huge problem, and there's no perfect solution to it either. I've argued for school choice, and that could be, if everybody kind of knows that if there's a creepy teacher around, right? And so if parents know that too, maybe they can't prove it. They should still be able to go somewhere else. This stuff happens in private schools too,
of
happens
course.
in charter schools. But the argument for school choice is not that it's going to fix everything and that the private is inherently better than the public. I kind of think that it is, but it doesn't mean it's going to eliminate it completely. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to take that step in the right direction.
Let's take one of the most so wait, so do you have any updates? So the argument is, which is just really, as you always point out, very telling, that like if you have school choice, it's going to destroy public schools. It's like, isn't that an argument for destroying public schools? Like if people have a
Yeah, if
choice
you're so
between
bad.
right, if people, I have a choice between 6 sodas and no one ever chooses the 6 soda, why are you manufacturing that soda? No one wants it. So like, how is that a bad
There,
thing? You resolved what the problem is.
their main argument against school choice is an admission of failure. It's like, well,
Right.
why would school choice destroy the public schools? Well, then they have to admit, well, it's because no one wants to go to the public schools.
Right. Like if you
As
and I had,
As Michael Malice would say, public schools are prisons for children,
yeah.
where one of the only places they'll ever experience violence in their lives.
Yeah, if like you and I had the choice between 6 cars and one of them's a Rolls Royce, and we're going to choose the Rolls Royce. So if the public schools are that great, people are going to be desperate to go in there. So, but do you have any information on those 15, soon to be 17 school states? What has been the consequences of school choice on the public schools?
Yeah, it's worse than the Rolls Royce example. The public schools are actually the Kia of the schools, and they cost more to produce than the
The Rolls
Rolls
Royce.
Royce.
Yeah, right.
And, but yeah, the 15 or so states we have overwhelming evidence that the public schools have actually gotten better. So for the
Oh,
libertarians listening, and you want the school system to be destroyed, I'm sorry, but the evidence doesn't bear that out. It actually shows the public schools marginally improve academics and behavioral outcomes as well. And Florida is a good example. Over the past couple decades, they've expanded school choice to most recently, it's for everybody. They did that in 2023. And they've went from the bottom of the pack on their academics on the nation's report card to now they're in the top couple of states on math and reading. And they
wow.
spend 27% less than the national average per student. It's not a money issue. And US News and World Report most recently ranked them #1 on education. So Florida is a great example. If you don't like correlation, there's rigorous academic studies on the topic too. 10 out of the 11 studies on this topic in Florida find positive effects of competition on the public schools. And if you don't want to listen to me, you can listen to the teachers union's main argument person who testified against the Texas school choice bill. His name is Josh Cowan. He was at Michigan State University, pretended he was a non-biased professor. He's now with Education Law Center, which is funded by Randy Weingarten and all the teachers unions, or a bunch of them. And he has admitted that even he has admitted that the competitive effects studies are positive. He'll try to
Oh, wow.
downplay them and say they're not big positive effects. But that's the main argument that the teachers unions make against school choice, that it's going to blow things up. Everything is going to be horrible for the kids who remain in the public schools. Their main witness admitted that's not the case. So case closed, pack it up. The debate's over. And Texas is, their Senate already passed the bill this year, and their House committee, 9-6 party line vote, passed it out. It's going to go on the House floor. A little birdie tells me within the next 2 weeks. And then Governor Abbott's obviously going to sign it. So
Yeah, he's
Texas
been
is going
very
to be the biggest victory of all.
he's been very vocal about this, Governor Abbott,
Yep.
and made it very much a priority of his. Maybe he's going to run for president. Who knows? Who cares? I don't care as long as it happens. So, what are the other states? So, which it was New Hampshire. I'm surprised they took this long. The Free State,
Yeah.
and Texas. What are the other states on the horizon where this is about to happen?
Yeah. So New Hampshire, was actually one of the leaders, that one of the first states to pass education savings accounts. They call them education freedom accounts in
Okay,
New Hampshire. So
I
that's one of
like
the
it.
best names. But it was targeted by income. It was only, I think you had to have like 400 or 500% of the poverty level to qualify or something like that. So it wasn't everybody. So I don't really count that. It's not universal, right? It's not everybody. They're picking winners and losers. And now they have a bill in both chambers. They've passed separately in both chambers to make it for everybody. There's slight differences in the bills that they pass, so they'll have to do a conference committee thing before it goes to the governor. Governor's a Republican, supports universal school choice, so it's going to happen. It's as close to a done deal as you can get. And some of the other states, South Carolina's on deck as well. It might or might not happen this year, but states that have already done it, Idaho went all in this year, Tennessee, and Idaho, Tennessee, and Wyoming passed universal school choice this year. And the other, 12 or so states, they are all Republican controlled states. Arizona being one of the first, Florida being one of the leaders, Iowa, Arkansas, Utah. I'm not even looking at a map. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head, but you get my drift. It's the red states. And why not the blue states? Well, the Democrats, as we pointed out earlier, they get so much of the funding from the teachers' unions. They're a wholly owned subsidiary of the teachers' unions at this point. There are some defectors. Some Democrats come along and vote with the Republicans on this issue, but then they get primaried by their party. It's an uphill battle for them to stay in office. And, Republicans, it's on their party platform to support school choice. So they're the ones that are passing these bills right now. In the book, I predict that some of the blue states will come along at some point because they'll have enough defectors on the issue, or maybe those blue states will become red states if they lose on the issue. But that hasn't really transpired yet. We've seen Gavin Newsom kind of swaying on the issue. He has
Wait,
a new
hold on.
podcast.
It has happened
Yeah.
because this was part of the key to Governor Youngkin becoming governor in 2023. This issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, a blue state that's still a blue state with the trifecta,
Oh,
like
sure. Yeah.
California, New
Oh,
York,
yeah, yeah.
they haven't done it. But yet, it's the things I predicted, like political victories on the right because of this, those are transpiring, and we saw that with the Glenn Youngkin victory, Trump's victory, winning on education as one of the priorities. DeSantis won because of school choice moms originally in 2018 because his opponent called to get rid of the voucher program that was already serving over 100,000 kids. And he looked at the exit polls. DeSantis way overperformed with Black moms who were disproportionately using that scholarship program. And so you can basically create single issue voters on this issue. And Republicans, if they're smart, they'll pick up the football and move forward with the Glenn Youngkin blueprint for political success. And if the Democrats are smart, they'll say, hey, hold up, I'm not going to let you do that. And I'm going to listen to the kids union, not just the teachers unions. Let's listen to the parents. But so many of the Democrats are just all in. There was one Democrat in Illinois this year that's coming out against the bill to regulate homeschooling. He says, his name is LaShawn Ford. He's based out of Chicago. He's a representative, and he's bucking the party trend by saying this is causing overcriminalization. This could get you 30 days in jail for not filling out some homeschooling
Oh, yeah,
paperwork.
yeah.
Gets you a misdemeanor, and you'll have to face fines too. So there are cracks in the dam, and hopefully it blows wide open and the teachers unions lose in the end.
Podcasting isn't just about talking. It's about growing, engaging, and monetizing. And that's where Podcast One Pro comes in. Whether you're an independent creator or a major brand, Podcast One Pro gives you the tools you need to take your podcast to the next level. We're talking about premium hosting, advanced analytics, dynamic ad integration, and expert distribution, all designed to maximize your reach and revenue. Plus, with access to Podcast One's industry-leading network, you'll be connected to top-tier advertisers and a massive audience. It's time to go pro and turn your passion into profit. Visit PodcastOnePro.com to get started today. Podcast One Pro, the power behind the podcast.
Let's get back to the show. I think, again, people don't appreciate to what extent it is a snake eating its own tail between the teachers' unions and Democratic Party. And if I'm a Democrat trying to get elected, my choice is, okay, I bend the knee and the teachers' union basically give me money for ads and whatever I need to get out the vote, or I try to face this behemoth. And then it's like, well, I mean, you saw what happened with Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia. I mean, political figure for a very long time in that state. Kristen Sinema from Arizona. As soon as you have Democrats, not just on this issue, but like when you have Republicans like Mitt Romney or Liz Cheney, oh my God, they're so brave, profiles in courage, they should be statues to them. But as soon as you have Democrats being like, guys, let's kind of moderate this a little. It's not even cut anything. Like, let's not spend as much. Oh my God, you're traitors, you're a disgrace, and they get run out of their own party. And if the Democrats listen more to Joe Manchin, Officer Harris might have won. I mean, Trump only won the popular vote by like 1.5%. It would have not been that hard to go in the other direction. But
she could have picked Josh Shapiro for VP. She didn't do that.
I know.
And maybe because he was Jewish, some people have postulated, but also because the unions didn't want him because he came out at least vocally in support of school choice. He went on Fox News supporting school choice.
He did?
Josh Shapiro. Yeah, Josh Shapiro did. So right before he was elected governor in 2022, his opponent, Doug Mastriano, who was backed by Trump, started calling Josh Shapiro a hypocrite on school choice. And so that was hurting him, I think,
Why
on
was
the
he a hypocrite?
internals because he went to private school and sent his
Oh,
kids to private school.
yeah, yeah.
And so Doug Mastriano was calling him a hypocrite. And then right after that, Josh Shapiro included in his own education platform on his website and everything. I had the Internet Archives. I wrote about it in the Wall Street Journal. I showed the before and after. Right before the election, he included private school choice in his
Wow.
platform. He went on Fox News in 2023, reiterating his support for school choice. And then they didn't get it done. And he came up with all these reasons as to why not. He said, well, the Democrats control the House. It's their fault. They only had a 1-seat majority. You can't tell me the governor can't twist one arm and get them
Right.
to join the Republicans. I think he tried to have his cake and eat it too. It looks like he lied. But my point when I wrote about it was that it doesn't matter whether he had a true change of heart. That would be helpful if he did, or if he was just reading the tea leaves.
Yeah, yeah.
Milton Friedman famously said it's not about getting the right people into office. It's about creating a climate where it's politically profitable for the
Yes.
wrong people to do the right thing. And so at least they're feeling the pressure.
Do you
And
know
yeah, I can't say the same for the Colorado Democrats, but at least we're seeing some defection.
how does this issue poll?
School choice support is about 71%, and you have
Oh my,
supermajority support across party lines. In
wow. Okay.
Texas, we had a University of Houston poll just come out showing supermajority support overall, with like 77% support among parents. And you look at like rural support was even higher than urban support, and so they kind of slice it up, and it's regardless of the background. I think white Democrats had the lowest level of support, and I think they still had 52% support among white Democrats.
It's very
And
hard for me.
so,
Yeah, one of the things, like, I'm gonna quote Judge Judy. One of the things she always yells about, I haven't watched the show in many years, is that parents should kids should have as much love in their lives as possible, because there'd be a situation, I don't even know if this would be on Judge Judy, where like the mom and dad weren't talking, or grandma's not allowed, and she goes, "You don't have the right to basically have your stupid feud get in the way of this kid having as much support as possible." So it's very hard for me, and I think for a lot of people listening to this, to have the argument about, there's a kid, let's give this kid as many options as possible, because not every kid's the same. Some kids will need those special schools. Some kids will do better with a rural population in their school than an urban, or so on and so forth. Like, the only question, and this is not a partisan issue, is what's best for that individual child. How can they thrive given their gifts and talents? Like, this just seems such a complete no-brainer to me. And the argument is, you have to go to the school that you're trapped in by geography. It's just crazy.
imagine if we had restaurants like this or grocery
Yeah, yeah.
stores. You'd have food poisoning, get empty shelves, and they told you got to pick up and move houses to get assigned to a better government-run grocery store. That is insane. Even if you had the money to do it, it would just be a pain in the ass to get up and move every time you wanted to switch grocery store. And so the public schools have so much monopoly power, and they just call for more money over and over again. It's the definition of insanity, and they don't give a crap about the kids. They're teachers unions, not kids unions. And Malice, I will say for some of the listeners, one of the arguments you might hear from the so-called, from the right, is that people will say, or even from libertarians, is that this causes government involvement in the private
Yeah.
sphere. And so we don't want government shekels to cause government shackles. My response is, you can get the shackles without the shekels. So you might as well take the choice
Right,
if
right.
it's presented to you. In Illinois, like I said, they got rid of school choice, and now they're coming after homeschoolers. They didn't
Right.
need school choice to come after your freedoms. And so, if anything, when you do have a broad based school choice coalition, that gives you more people to fight back against those regulations in the future. So, politics is all about organized interest. And what we want is for more people to benefit from private education so that you can fight back against people. Like in Oregon in 1922, they outlawed private education altogether. That got overturned in Pierce versus Society of Sisters at the Supreme Court 3 years later in 1925. But that wasn't because of school choice that it initially happened. And you have New York. You have to take the standardized test to raise your own kid at home, to homeschool. You have to get a certain proficiency on those tests as well, and they don't have school choice. So I've heard that argument of making the perfect the enemy of the good, and I wanted to address it, really quickly, because that Illinois example is perfect evidence that if anything, having school choice reduces the likelihood of regulation.
And I think it goes without saying, right, that kids, or I would correct me, maybe I'm wrong, and I'm being biased here, confirmation bias. Do kids that are homeschooled and go to private school or charter schools outperform public school kids when it comes to like standardized testing in universities?
Yeah, yeah, on average they do. And so, you always have outliers. And the arguments against homeschooling is people will say, well, some of them are miseducated. Well, so like, okay, you're going to abolish all of the public schools too, because you have 30 of them or so in Chicago with 0% math proficiency rates. And what do you say there is the solution? Throw more money at it. They're already spent
With
$30,000 per
zero?
kid. 0 kids in the entire school for 30 or so over 30 schools in Chicago. 0% math proficiency. In Baltimore, you have 40% of their high schools in Baltimore in the government sector, 0% math proficiency, and they spend tons of money too. And so they're failure factories, and they have no business telling us that we shouldn't have a choice to find the educational environment that's best for our kids or to raise our own kids. Parents do better than the government bureaucrats. They know their kids better and they care about their kids more. Obviously, there are outliers of cases of abuse and stuff, but that doesn't mean we should have to prove our innocence. That we shouldn't turn the Fourth Amendment on its head. Some parents might not feed their kids correctly. Does that mean we have government bureaucrats coming into our households each night for dinner to check and make sure we're doing everything okay? No, if there's evidence of abuse, then perhaps people come in and take care of it afterwards. But we don't say everybody's guilty until proven innocent.
So how realistic is the hope that President Trump is actually going to do some long-term sustained damage, at least to the Department of Education?
So he already has. He already has
Okay,
cut
right.
half the department. He already has stopped DEI grants, millions of dollars, stopped funding for universities, and moved services to other or other departments. So I think
Wait, so the
those
services
are
have already been moved?
wins. Yeah, I mean, he announced it the day after signing the executive order.
Oh,
So he said this
oh,
is
I didn't.
happening.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
student loans to Small Business Administration,
I
special needs
I thought that was him
to
just talking about
HHS.
down the road. Oh, this has actually happened already.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
he was
wonderful.
sitting there and doing it at a press conference. And so, as far as completely eliminating the department, my hope is that either some Democrats come along. I don't have much confidence after them voting against the 80-20 issue of protecting women's sports.
Right.
But maybe they lose some seats in the midterms because of this crap. And the midterms are next year, 2026. Trump will have 2 more years after that. And so, if the Senate and if Republicans keep the House, um, maybe we have a better chance after the midterm. So, but I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what those elections are going to look like. But as far as right now, I don't think with the current votes we have, I don't think the Senate is going to get 7 Democrats to come along and vote to
Sure.
abolish the Department of Education.
But
I hope I'm proven wrong, but he's already done a lot. So that's hopefully that momentum continues. And hopefully after Trump is out of office, a Republican wins again who has similar views.
and the other thing is, if it exists in name only, where you have a Department of Education, but it's just some janitor cleaning an old office, who cares?
Yeah, who cares? Exactly.
Right. What are you most hopeful about in terms of the future of education in America?
The school choice revolution is unfolding. So we have laboratories of democracy, and the red states are engaging in friendly competition to empower families with school choice. Home state of Texas is next. They're passing Senate Bill 2, which has passed out of the Senate, out of House committee. It's going to the floor vote very soon. Governor Abbott will sign it. And once Texas and their government school monopoly domino falls, you'll have others which will be more likely to come along as well. And then hopefully the blue states feel the pressure at some point, or some of those blue states become red states. That's what I'm most hopeful about. And it's there's a lot of gloomy things to look at on education, like in Colorado, and them injecting politics into the classroom. You're looking at our nationwide test scores showing decades of learning loss relative to 2019. The good news is that families have woken up, and even though the schools are open, the problems are still there, and people are sharing them all over social media. And sunlight is the best disinfectant. And
Yep.
because the school system is a one size fits all disaster that by definition is never going to meet the needs of individual families. No matter what comes out into the public eye, you're going to have people disagree about it. And that's a great argument for school choice.
Corey, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Talking about, well, I mean, there's a lot of good parts, but talking about the optimistic things that are to come on the school choice front, but also talking about, which I don't talk about much, some of the negative things that are happening, because we do need to shine a spotlight on the problems that are happening in blue states like Colorado and Illinois. It fuels the argument for school choice, but also fuels the argument as to why the people in power in those states need to be thrown out of office.
You are welcome.
Pluto TV has all the shows and movies you love streaming for free. That means laughter is free with gut-busting comedies like The Neighborhood, Boomerang, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Bueller.
Mystery is free with countless cases to crack from Criminal Minds, Tracker, and Matlock.
I'm a lawyer, like the old TV show.
And thrills are free with heart-pumping hits like The Walking Dead and Pulp Fiction.
Correct the mundo.
Feel the free Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.